So my talk is called Crossing the Enterprise Chasm. As Brianne said, my name is Michael Grinich. You can tweet me if you want. My handle is Grinich. Currently working on a company called WorkOS, which hasn't launched yet. Before that, I started a company called Nihilus, which is an email company that I ran for about 5 years. Before that, I worked at Dropbox. So I've kind of been in like the cloud SaaS world pretty much the whole time I've been in the industry. I want to give a warning for today. This talk is absolutely brand new. I rehearsed it once last night at about 1:30 in the morning, so you're seeing it for the first time. It also has a lot of text, so sorry about that. So before I get started, can I get a show of hands of how many of you are building a SaaS product? This should be everyone. We're at SaaS School. If you're not raising your hand, you're probably a VC. How many of you are doing a freemium-driven growth plan? It's kind of bottom-up, self-serve, freemium. Okay, and how many of you have product market fit? Feel like you kind of do. How many of you have not yet sold like an enterprise deal, like 500 seats or more? Okay, so that's a lot of hands. This talk is for you. Also, please raise your hand or interrupt me as we go through. I'd love to get questions as we go. So for context, this is kind of what we're talking about. So this is from Mary Meeker's deck, her Internet Trends deck last year. This is really the success formula for enterprise software companies. So build an amazing product that's kind of consumer grade, has really good design. You leverage the virality of that to onboard your users to have really low cost customer acquisition. You kind of harness that and actually to kind of punch into enterprise environments. That becomes kind of the core of your go-to-market motion. You build your enterprise grade platform. And now you have this amazing thing where you're able to monetize enterprise customers by leveraging that low cost acquisition. At least that's the theory, right? This is from Ilya Fushman at KP. So what I'm going to talk about is this part of it right here. The part where you actually build the enterprise version of it. And this is really where you start to actually activate revenue and build a business. The title of this talk is obviously referencing this book. Who's read this book, The Crossing Chasm? Yeah. So essentially this book talks about techniques around kind of overcoming the challenges when you're moving from early adopters to kind of mass market for your product. And it kind of is for any product, right? It could be for not just enterprise SaaS, like the iPod. So my statement here, my kind of thesis is that in B2B cloud SaaS apps, there's something called the Enterprise Chasm that separates small early adopter users from your large enterprise companies. And also that crossing this really efficiently and quickly is the most important key to winning your product category across the whole market. Right, so you need to do this quickly and efficiently. And if you screw this up, your product will probably die. I've had this experience before. You've seen it in the market across the way. So this is my core thesis is that there's an enterprise chasm, and you need to cross it. So there's 3 parts of this talk. The first thing is why you should do this at all. You might not believe me. That's fine. So I'm going to kind of describe why you should care about this or what it could do to your business. The second thing is what makes it hard. If it was easy, everyone would do it. So what are the challenges and risks associated with it? And convince you that it's actually maybe not that hard. And then the third thing is some actual tactical kind of nuts and bolts. What does it look like to cross this chasm? How do you actually do it? How do you actually make your app enterprise ready? And what are the steps that you take? So this is what we're going to go through. Why should you do this at all? By the show of hands, my guess is most of you are in this kind of early adopter growth part of the cycle, right? Your app is growing organically, you got word of mouth, there's probably some strong virality. You're probably getting a lot of signups to organic channels, whether that's Product Hunt or Twitter or Hacker News. You got product market fit. Users love your app. They're sharing it, they're spreading it. You can really kind of feel that, in addition to seeing the numbers. You probably have a tiny or 0 sales team, right? But are still growing your revenue pretty quickly from self-serve conversions. How many people are in this state right now? Yeah, okay. You're okay, everything's awesome, right? The Lego video, right? Well, not exactly. So here's kind of a blown up version of that curve, and you're kind of in the yellow and the orange here. And if you notice, the area under the curve on the right is much, much, much larger. And that's where you actually need to go. And there's that gap. That's what you actually have to cross. So even though it feels like everything's going really well right now, you're accelerating on the way up, but you're going to hit this wall. OK, so why cross it? Like, what are the actual benefits of doing it? Well, one is that you get some increased product differentiation. So it's more defensible. This is like another moat for your product, right? If you kind of build an enterprise version of it. Another reason is you can decrease customer churn. If you go after enterprise customers, they have much, much better net dollar retention, right? So you can not only get bigger deals, but kind of have more of a predictable sales motion around that too. Churn kills SaaS companies, so going up market reduces that. And you can also expand your total addressable market, right? So if you're selling mostly to SMBs, it might not feel like it, but you're going to run out of gas there at some point. And if you want to keep accelerating, you have to keep kind of opening headroom around larger and larger contracts to sell. So going up market, kind of crossing this enterprise chasm, expands your TAM. And as a founder, the thing that I care about the most is controlling my own destiny. And that means not being kind of constricted around VC capital. So if you can accelerate revenue growth, you can get to a position of being cash flow positive. You can really control your own destiny around the company. Not doing it is also a risk. So imagine this, you come up with some new inventive product, you're the first company to build this, you've kind of changed the way, say, people communicate, or the way people, write documents in the workplace, or maybe the way that they talk over video calls. So you work and work and work, and you put a lot of money into R&D, and you educate the entire market, and you're first to market, and people are excited by your stuff. But if you don't do this, if you actually don't go up market to the larger segment, you can have the instance where a competitor is able to come in and essentially capture those lucrative enterprise deals where you've done all the work to warm up the whole market to it, right? So they're like, thanks a lot, we'll just take those contracts. And this is bad because it's extremely, extremely hard to recover. Once you lose those deals, it's not like you can flip over and get those enterprise contracts back. By their nature, right? They're big, they have lower churn, they're hard to get back. And one example of this is like Dropbox versus Box. So I worked at Dropbox years and years and years ago. Dropbox didn't do enterprise stuff for a super long time. That's pretty much why Box exists as a company, right? They were able to actually target this initially, go get American Airlines, Coca-Cola, these companies that are not going to like easily transition back off of it, and that revenue sustained them. Another one that's playing out right now is like Slack versus Microsoft Teams. And this is like, they're at war right now. And Slack is putting everything they can into making their product enterprise ready to go up market, and it's still a struggle, right? Okay, so like that's a reason why to do it. There's huge benefits, but then there's also these risks around not doing it for your business longer term. Next thing, why is this hard? Like what makes this actually difficult to do? And I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just trying to kind of lay out the challenges. So, obviously I think it's worth doing. Enterprise features are really complicated. They're not hard, like capital H hard, like building computer vision or like deep learning or biomedical stuff is hard, but they're really complicated. And what I mean by that is there's like a lot of small details with a lot of surface area for bugs, right? This means they take a long time to build, like wall time, clock time, and that means you burn cash during that, so they're expensive to do. And so you need to be prepared to invest in this. Make sure you have runway, like kind of back of the envelope if you're just going to get started doing this. It's probably going to take you like $1 to $2 million in about a year-ish. So if you have like 6 months of runway, don't start working on this, right? It's like do something else. But after you raise like a Series A or Series B and you're saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, be prepared to invest. I heard this from a PM at Slack, who I won't name, but they said that I would guess we've spent about $30 million doing this so far, and they're like only halfway there. So that gives you a sense of like kind of the total amount you'll have to invest in this over time. That's not to get started, but that's like over time. It's complicated, that means it's expensive. That's one thing, that's a challenge. Engineers also really don't like building these. It's not fun to code. Usually you're dealing with like legacy technology, working with some old system, not the shiny new hotness, right? These features are not visible to end users or your friends that are using the product. It's only usually visible to the IT manager. If that, sometimes they're just, back office. Most companies aren't set up to give any glory or promotions to people building this stuff. When you have your Friday all hands and you demo something, it's more around something shiny and cool, not cool, you built a security feature. And so that disincentivizes engineers from focusing on it or spending time on it, or managers from prioritizing it. And this is honestly a huge challenge. It's not a technical specific thing you have to overcome. It's more of an internal prioritization. It's hard to motivate your engineering team to work on this and focus. And it's not something where you can say, okay, we're all going to do this for a month, and then we're going to be done. You need to do it going forward over time. And that's a big kind of cultural shift you have to make as an org. You don't have to convince the salespeople that this is important, though, right? They're like, I got pipelines blocked. It's the engineers. Another thing that's challenging here is feature prioritization is really hard. And what I mean by that is when you're trying to figure out what do we actually need to build to satisfy these enterprise customers, it's hard to kind of sift through it and figure out what to do and what to do first. And so one thing that's hard to figure out is what features are a one-off thing that you're building for this big customer you're trying to land versus what's something that's going to be shared across multiple customers in the future. And that makes it hard to prioritize with engineers and feel like you're not doing kind of non-repeatable or wasted work. You want to be building towards something. And it's just kind of hard to figure this out early on. The way you do it is by doing really deep customer research with people in enterprise IT to collect those requirements and synthesize it and get the whole team on the same page. This is very, very different than the typical Silicon Valley PM job, which is kind of coming up with new features, running experiments, empathizing with the user, who's maybe the person at the coffee shop across from you. It's very, very different. It's very much cut and dry, go get a spreadsheet, survey a ton of people, and talk to everyone. And it gets even harder because you need to prioritize this not based on who your current customers are or currently are adopters, but who you're going towards, right? So you might not even be talking to the right people. So it's a really strong potential selection bias. So you might just build the wrong stuff for a long time. It's hard to develop confidence around knowing what to build when you're going out market. And really what this means when you kind of distill it down is two things. The first is if you're working at the company, you're no longer the user, really. That transition has happened, right? But the bigger thing is your user is no longer the buyer. When you're building a self-serve bottom-up SaaS product, you assume that your user is going to be the one that puts in the credit card, that is the buyer. Especially if it's even early Dropbox, upgrade your Dropbox, put in your credit card for $12 a month. Your buyer here now is the CIO or the CTO or CSO or somebody at an executive level that probably doesn't care about what the design is. They care about other things. And so building deep empathy with these people and a process around learning their requirements and be able to talk to them regularly is a big challenge. And so when I mentioned engineers don't want to do this and you have to transition your engineering org, this is very similar, but for your product org and how you think about prioritizing this stuff. So that's hard. And also you have to split your focus. So this is a little bit more subtle, but also is very challenging, right? So if you don't build for enterprise, right, what I mentioned, one of the risks, competitor comes in, swoops in and takes that market and probably takes it for good. It's hard to get those contracts back. It's hard for Dropbox to go grab those things back from Box. But if you exclusively start doing enterprise stuff, and you don't keep building things for end users, a new startup can come and build something shiny and pull people away, right? And that was your growth channel. So you're kind of screwed there, right? And so you can't really just exclusively do one of these things. You have to do both at the same time, and this sucks. It's very frustrating and very, very hard to prioritize, and especially from a leadership and management perspective, it's a big challenge to kind of hold these two states in your mind and motivate the team with both. It's not easy. There's technical challenges, there's organizational challenges, there's motivation challenges around your engineers. Even figuring out what to do is challenging. Figuring out what the first steps are is really challenging. So it can kind of feel overwhelming, and I think that's one reason why companies don't proactively do this when they would rather go back to the safe place, which is building for themselves or building things for their friends, even to the detriment of the longer term business. Yep.
And actually, this probably spans both conversations. So you talked about the technical challenges. I assume there's also challenges from a marketing perspective, because now you're marketing to two completely different kinds of end users in some ways. And so how does that flow to how you might sort of market to that other non-user buyer as well?
That's a really good question, and is like a huge question. And to be honest, like I'm not a pro at like enterprise marketing, like go-to-market stuff. There are people that are really, really good at it. I think some amount of it is being like really specifically data-driven, so you can harness the kind of like bottom-up self-serve motion and sell in the enterprise. Like that's what Drift did really, really well. Being able to like pull signal out of that, so you're kind of putting all the wood behind one arrow and trying to convert those people up. There's an entire other, several talks that you could give around like how to communicate to those stakeholders as they change, how like your packaging changes, sort of like how you insert yourself into different conversations and build stakeholders. Like you're no longer selling to one stakeholder who's your user. That's kind of the main thing. And your messaging has to reflect that, and you have to have like multiple inroads. So it kind of just becomes like fractal. It gets like more and more complicated. Okay, so third, how do you actually do this? So how do you actually make your app enterprise ready? And I want to talk about how you can kind of start today, and also kind of the breadth of all the things you can do. So when you go up market, kind of like the enterprise go-to-market challenges, this is sort of what I was mentioning, is there's like a lot of different things you have to do. Your messaging, kind of your positioning is only one part of it, but also you have to think about your packaging, like what features are kind of in like what prices, what segments. You have to build sales collateral. You have to kind of arm your sales team with ammo to be able to go out into this brave new world. There's questions on security and compliance, and you have multiple stakeholders that are adjacent to your users. You think about partnerships, channel, distribution, and a lot of this stuff keeps changing as you go. You kind of discover one thing and then move to the next. So it's a whole holistic problem, right? The whole organization has to evolve in this way. I think the most important thing to talk about here is product, because it's usually what you do first. You already have like demand from people who are kind of in enterprise environments that you can capture. And product changes are sort of the most universal. Like they're the same things across multiple product domains. And so like the messaging challenges for something like Postman might be very different than the messaging changes for something like Dropbox going up market, but product-wise, kind of the requirements are relatively similar. Okay, and that means like, what do enterprise IT managers want? So I'm just going to tell you, so you don't have to go interview people. So I've been doing this for like a year. So what do they want? What do they want? The IT managers of the world. There's three things that they're like really into, that they love. One is visibility. So you're building a product, selling it to them. They want to be able to see what's happening in the app. The second thing is they want control. So they want to be able to choose what can and can't happen in the product, in the application. They want control over that. And the third thing that they want is trust. And what I mean by this is they want some guarantees about your product. They're building a relationship with you. They're depending on you. They need to have some trust with you. And that could be trust that you're going to pick up the phone when they call and something breaks. That could be trust that you're managing their data in a really secure way through some kind of certification or compliance. That could be trust that you're just not going to go down, right? Some kind of SLA. But they need some kind of trust because you're building a stronger, more important relationship with them. So essentially what I'm going to do, these are kind of the three main categories that I found that they care about. And there's a bunch of stuff in each one of them, but I'm just going to give you sort of like the first thing you could do in it just to get started. That would kind of start the motion. Because you can't really only just like do one of these and then go sell in the enterprise. You have to hit all three of them to some degree. Okay, so first one, visibility. The easiest way to do this is to build something called an audit log. This sounds super boring. Audit logs are essentially an activity stream, what happened in your application. You'll find that almost every single enterprise cloud SaaS product eventually has this. Like GitHub has this, Dropbox has this, Microsoft has this in everything they build. It's an activity stream of the things that actually happen inside of your product. You create these instrumented events like document.created or user.loggedin, document.shared. You usually need to match a very common schema where you have a target and an actor and an action and some metadata associated with it. You need to allow this to be like searchable and filterable by IT admins. So they need to be able to access the data and work with it. And then they also need to be able to export it. So Splunk is a really common thing that people in IT will pipe audit logs into from multiple products. You need to be able to export to that, or CSVs, or S3 buckets. You might look at this and be like, oh, can I just use like segment for this, or just use like mixed panel? Not really. It's like just different enough that you can't drop something like that in. This is not supposed to be viewed internally inside your company. This is not something you're going to make product decisions around. This is not like analytics for your product. This is like what happened, and you're going to give it to your customers. So you can't really exactly use one of those things off the shelf. But again, relatively straightforward, but like complicated. See what I mean? Like complicated to do. But that is kind of the first step around giving visibility. Just like, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what's happened. The user failed to log in 6 times, changed their password, and then login was successful. Stuff so they can see stuff like that. Second, control. The first thing to do here is to allow them to connect it to their single sign-on provider. SAML is one of the protocols used for single sign-on. If you're not familiar with SSO, essentially what this means is that they can log in through their identity provider. So like imagine signing with Google, right, restricting it to that, but it's not Google, it's like anything that they want, that they might have in-house or have from another vendor. IDP is the shorthand for identity provider. They often want this because it's required to enforce certain security positions inside the company, right? So you don't have to require like password length or two-factor auth. If you go through their identity provider, it's enforced in that system. To make this a little bit more concrete, example identity providers that are out there include things like Okta, G Suite actually can be used as one, ADFS, which is the Microsoft Active Directory Federation Service, which sounds super fun. One Login, Ping, Glue, WSO2, Shibboleth. These are all different providers, and SAML is one of the protocols under the hood. It's one of about 3 or 4 protocols. So built into this, they can sign in using their own tool. It gives them some amount of control over the way users auth. Authentication is often kind of like the first thing they reach for, so you'll hear this pretty early. And you probably also want to consider building, this is going into the weeds a little bit, but SCIM or Azure AD support. This is for user provisioning and deprovisioning automatically. You go sell to a company that has 2,000 employees, there's no way they're going to like log into your dashboard to automatically add and remove a user, right? They need to like have it listen to their source of truth for the user list. And so you bind it to that and you get callbacks. So again, pretty complicated, not like hard, but complicated. Show of hands, how many of you have done SSO or like are trying to do it? Yeah, it's like everyone, yeah. And then the third one is trust. Trust is hard, hard to win, easily lost. The easiest way to get started in this, right when you're getting started, is actually to build a security policy and have a security policy document. How many of you have ever received like a vendor security assessment? Good question. Yeah, literally everyone. Okay. So filling those out along with your security doc and having a good position there is like the easiest first way to build trust. You don't necessarily have to do anything on the engineering team. Here's some examples of things that are out there that you would maybe receive or have to fill out. Cloud Security Alliance has something called the CIAQ. This one's pretty popular. It's like a big Excel spreadsheet. The Center for Internet Security has a CSC. That one is also common. This one, although it's called the Standardized Information Gathering Questionnaire, I found is like a little less standardized. Like, I don't know why you would put standardized in the name. And then the most common one out here in Silicon Valley is the Vendor Security Alliance Questionnaire. Companies like Airbnb are part of this alliance. I don't know what they're fighting, but they're, I guess, insecure software. These are really long surveys you have to fill out. They kind of all more or less ask the same question, but they're different enough that you have to do them independently. And companies will usually demand that you fill out theirs. So going through this and spending some time looking at it. Really what you're doing here is kind of codifying your security practice and your security positions in a way that you can communicate it to them. So in addition to filling this out, you should build kind of your own security policy document that you can send. Just say, hey, this is how we do things here. Here's how we deal with data. This is how we ship code. This is how we know it's secure. And so this is not actually like a product or like technical thing. It's more like expressing what you operationally do inside the company to show that you're trustworthy. There's a lot of other stuff around trust you can do down the line, including like SOC 2 compliance or the ISOs or pen tests or audits of your code base. All great, all important at some point. What I found is that they're really overkill when you're getting started, and this is kind of like, if you can spend time here, you can get the biggest return from it. And oftentimes you can say like, SOC 2 is on our roadmap in the next 24 months, you can get the deal signed. But if you don't have like a language around communicating this or a way to express it, you're kind of screwed. So Where do you start? Visibility, audit logs, control, build some SSO into your product, and trust. Fill out one of those surveys and write your security policy doc. I think this should be enough to do like at least a couple million in enterprise ARR. So like it's enough to kind of like get started and get you like, you know, kind of to the next funding round or build a team around it or get going. But it doesn't stop here. So there is a lot of other stuff to do. Here's just a flavor of them. So directory, SCIM stuff, user provisioning and deprovisioning. SCIM is a new standard, but people tie this into Active Directory, or they say like, hey, we needed to listen to Workday, because that's where our user list is, or Namely, or Gusto. Org structure and team management, so managing teams inside your product. Change management, that's kind of like feature flags. Big enterprise customers really don't like it when you ship a new feature and don't tell them about it. They hate being delighted, you know, that doesn't exist. And so you have to tell them, hey, we're rolling this out, it's coming next quarter, here's the UI change, here's how to update your internal training materials, right? Here's how to update your kind of onboarding things. Here's how to just not like get an angry call from the head of product being like, what just happened? Like the entire UI just changed. So you have to build that. Data retention, data deletion, geographic data residency. It's, you know, maybe that's related to some compliance stuff. RBAC, which I mentioned, all the compliance stuff, SOC 2, the ISOs, ISO 27001 and 08 and 09. Integrations, which is like building an API, connecting your product to other things. Not quite Zapier, but sort of. Like enterprise admins want to be able to write scripts that work with stuff. How the data is encrypted. Slack has something called EKM, which I could give a whole talk on, but like that's a thing down the line. They even want to pay differently, right? If you're spending $250,000 on a product, you are not going to put that on the Amex. You're going to want to wire the money. You're going to need to get an invoice, a PO, sent to the finance department, you know, paid net 90. The way you even charge people changes. And SLAs, analytics around behavior reporting, this is not complete. This goes and goes and goes and goes. So I kind of gave you like the taste of, you know, what are like the three, yeah, these are like kind of the 3 ways to get started. I think if you do these, it's like the biggest bang for the buck. But this definitely isn't like where you stop. So you need to build like, this is an excellence in-house and understand you're going to keep investing in it. And there's big benefit to doing it too. Like it'll pay off. Okay. This is not an overnight process too. It takes time. So, you know, kind of be patient. I would say like you need to balance between talking to your really excited early adopters and getting a lot of feedback from them and trying to close them, but not reading too much into them and understanding it's a bigger, brighter world out there. Sometimes even just getting a handful of enterprise deals can be enough to like boost your revenue and push you into like the next Series B or whatever round of financing. And if you don't think this applies to you, you're like, oh, we'll just do self-serve forever. I would really start questioning that and really think about the opportunity. One of my friends, who's a VC, had this tweet in this blog post where he talks about, you know, if you're selling a $10,000 a year product, self-serve, there's probably some customers there that would pay $100,000 a year, and you can go find them. And if you have a few $100,000 a year customers, you can probably get a few $1 million a year customers. So you can really go up in order of magnitude. So that's my talk. I didn't talk about the company I'm building, but we do this and help companies become enterprise ready, both through technology and kind of advice, but really heavy on the technology team to help you leapfrog to that point of being enterprise ready. If you want to learn more, shoot me an email or tweet at me or come find me afterward. I'll be around most of the day.
Awesome.
Yeah,
thanks so much.